Hello, welcome back to JC's Writing Advice. I'm JC Bybee, indie author, YouTuber, and writer coach. You can find my books and my writing coaching services at jcbybee.com. You can also head over to patreon.com and help me buy a chair that doesn't do that when I move. I would sure appreciate it. So today's video is going to be on revisions. It's going to be part of a hopefully two video series about revising your book and the process. Again, as with all of my other videos, I'm not telling you this is something you have to do. This is guidance, this is advice, this is a way of approaching things. So take what works and ignore what doesn't. Now, revisions. What are revisions? Lots of people have asked that question. Not everybody understands what it means to revise a novel or a short story or a series even. So, what are revisions? They can include the following. Critique group feedback. If you are lucky enough to be in a writer's group or a critique group, you will get feedback from them, hopefully both good and bad. Things that work, things that don't work. If your critique group is only singing your praises, might be time to find a new critique group. Now, if your critique group and your beta readers and your editor are just singing your praises, well, that's a different story. But you will get feedback, and hopefully it'll be constructive. Beta reader comments. If you have finished your manuscript and you're going through the beta reader process, they will hopefully give you feedback. Some will, some won't. From what I understand, having never had beta readers myself, sometimes the feedback is useful, sometimes it's not, and sometimes they just forget. Then you also have your editor comments. Now these are, if you have hired a professional editor, these should hold some weight for you. Because you're hiring somebody, you're probably paying a lot. You should be paying for their services. And their job is to do everything in their power for whatever type of editing you're getting to make your story the best it can be. So editor comments should hold a lot of weight. And then your own changing ideas for the story. Sometimes you'll just figure out a different way of approaching your book. It has happened to me twice. If you've listened to some of our episodes of Third Person POV, the podcast I'm co-host of, I am not the only one on that. You'll learn that twice I have deleted between 25 and 30,000 words from a book and started over. And that's something that happens sometimes. You just have to live with it. When should you revise? That's a good question. First question I would ask anybody that asks me that is, where are you in your writing process? If you have finished your first draft, then you can consider... Didn't catch that typo. I should have revised this before I did it. See what I did there? No, that was an accident. So, once you have finished a draft of your book, then you can go back and start revising. You don't want to get stuck in the trap, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, of constantly revising the first chapter or the first two chapters over and over and over again. You need to finish the draft first, so the overall critiques and the overall feedback work better. Another time you can start, if you've got your draft done and you've got a solid amount of feedback, then you can go back through and incorporate and look at and evaluate the critiques that you've been given, whether it's beta reader feedback, whether it's your critique group feedback. When I was going through Technomancer, the second book in the Collinsworth Case Files series, I was giving it to my critique group, and you can actually go and watch some of the episodes where I talk about it. And I didn't go back and incorporate that feedback until I was going through one of my revisions. And I went through the revision and I would look at the feedback and I would try to figure out how to address it. Some of it I ignored. Wasn't important. Some of it I incorporated because it was necessary. Hilariously, I completely forgot to mention that everybody thought a character was dead. And she wasn't. And she was the antagonist. And the reader knows it. But the characters in the book didn't know it. Everybody thought she was dead. The reader knows she's alive. And so when my critique group got to that scene, they kept asking me, why aren't they going after her? Why aren't they going after her? And then I finally asked, did I forget to mention she was dead? They think she's dead? And that answered all their questions. So that revision helped to make sure I closed up a gap that I had. But I didn't go back and look for that and take care of that until after I was done writing the story. Because it's all part of the process of revising. And then whenever your editor gives you back your manuscript, you need to take all of their critiques and all of their consideration and all of their suggestions into serious consideration, because editors are doing that. That's what they do. It's their job. Their job is to take and look at your manuscript and refine it and help you refine it. So while you might not agree with your critique group, if your critique group, your beta readers, and your editor are all saying the same thing, you need to look at that, whatever it might be, and address it somehow. And you can't just sit there and say, well, maybe they just don't understand. If they don't understand, you're writing a bad book. You've got to make sure that you are writing in such a way that your ideas are being conveyed, so that when somebody picks up your story and reads it, they can follow what you're saying. And if your editor is saying they're not going to understand this, you really need to take that into consideration. That's their job. Their editor is there to make sure your book works. And I miss not having an editor for my first 4 books. Yeah, I wrote 4 books, didn't have an editor. Professional editor. My wife, who I love dearly, she works very, very hard on making sure that I don't have continuity errors, that I don't have grammatical errors, that she can understand what's going on. The problem with that is, not that she's not going to give me honest feedback, she does. The problem with that is we talk so much about my stories as she has information available to her that not everybody else does, so sometimes she fills in the gaps. That's why I'm glad I have a critique group, because I don't talk about all of my book ideas with them. They don't know everything behind the scenes. And so if I miss it, my wife misses it, my critique group might catch it. So these are the kind of things you need to take into consideration as you're working on your book. And then some cautions. And I will say this, it is still your book. My co-host Tyler Hess, really good writer, he is currently working on a book titled The Hounds of Brecon, book 1 in a trilogy. YA contemporary fantasy. And we've given him suggestions as we've read through book 1 and finished reading through book 1. And I guarantee some of the things we've talked about he's not implemented, because we were wrong. When we got to the end, we looked at it all and we all agreed that some of the suggestions we gave throughout weren't fitting because of the way he ended the book. And that's something that you have to keep in mind. It is still your book. The ideas are still yours. So when you look at the suggestions, you need to consider them. These people, whether it's your critique group, your beta readers, or your editor, especially your editor, took time out of their days to give you feedback. And if one person is saying it, maybe you can put it aside. If multiple people are saying it, it's something you need to really seriously consider as you go forward in the process. Like I was saying, not every suggestion is a good suggestion, though. Something that Tyler gets on me a little bit about is my main character in Technomancer, Jessica. She's kind of invincible. And so he gives me a little bit of a hard time about that because Ace and Jessica, my two characters in the Hero Unit series, they're really powerful, and it makes it difficult sometimes to put stakes in if I'm not just doing emotional stakes. And he's helped me with that to where I have a different route. These stakes can't be physical for Ace especially, but also in a real way Jessica. So I have to look for the emotional stakes, and that's something I'm working on. I'm not very good at it. So that's a good suggestion that comes from them. But to go back and say, well, you should make Jessica less powerful, that's not what I want to do. I want to show that you can write superhero or Superman level powers on people and still make them interesting books. Overdoing your revisions. Because some people didn't understand can lead to a worse story. I didn't word that very well. Trying to take in every single piece of feedback is a bad idea. Because it's, like I said at the top of, like it says at the top of the screen, it's still your book. Yes, you can look at what people have said and try to take a look at it and try to look at it from the reader's angle and look at it from the overall story. But you can't obsessively revise and revise and revise because you keep getting feedback that you don't like or the people aren't quite following what you're doing, and you get into this endless cycle of revise and submit and revise and submit and revise and submit, and you never finish the book. Make sure you stick with your core concept, your core ideas, and make sure you're fleshing them out and giving them real weight. And people will want to read what you're writing. But you can also get stuck in this trap of it's not good enough yet because there's still critiques. It's not good enough yet because there's still critiques. I have yet to read a book that I don't have some critiques of. Even, and I know this might come as a shock to some people, even The Wheel of Time. There are things about it that I would have preferred that he do differently. Not saying I would have done it differently, or I can't write epic fantasy. I've tried. It's currently not something I can handle. So the approach is different, and so when I look at it from the angle of a thriller or a mystery writer with a little bit of fantasy background, so I look at it differently. You don't know what your readers' backgrounds are, your critique group's background. You should know what your critique group's backgrounds are, but you don't necessarily know that your beta readers are 100% in the right genre. So don't overdo your revisions. And then make sure that you and the editor are on the same page for your overall story. This is why we emphasize hiring a dev editor before you really get going, because they can help refine the process. And that's something that, as a writer coach, I can help you do. As just a shameless self-promotion, I can help you with this process of making sure you know where you're going with your book. So when you hand that finished book to an editor, it's one step further along the revision process. Or I can help you get ready to give a presentation to a developmental editor who can then say, okay, this is where you're going. Now I understand. This is how you want to develop those ideas. I am not a dev editor. I am not an editor. I can help with some of those aspects, but I will be honest at times and say, you need to go see a developmental editor. And I have a couple I can suggest and recommend, and there's websites you can go to. But you need to make sure that at the end of the day, when you say, I want to do this, the editor doesn't hear, I want to do this. They understand where you want to go with your book. That way they can give you the most effective feedback. And again, suggestions are just that. They're suggestions. Gray Alder in my critique group, third person POV, he has a very particular writing style. He tends to be very verbose. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Our job isn't to make him less him. Our job is to simply refine what he does. And our responsibility is to point out, okay, it works here, but maybe you need to trim that here. I have things that I need to work on. We don't often get the right kind of stakes in my books. And that's something I need to work on. Tyler's really good at dialogue and characterization, but sometimes when he's writing, we just get scenes that feel like talking heads and we don't know what's going on. And those are all things that all of us are working on. But in the end, suggestions are just that, suggestions. I'm going to wrap this up with never stop learning about writing. Continue to study the craft. Continue to read books about writing. Take classes. Go to writers' conferences. We have one coming up this fall, this October 10th in the Bear Lake area. It's in Montpelier, Idaho. I will hopefully remember to link that in the description. It is a great conference because it's small with quality instruction. Another shameless self-promotion. Watch YouTube videos. Beyond myself and third-person POV, there are a lot of writer-centric YouTube videos out there. And you can learn a lot from those videos, from what people are saying, and from the lessons of other people. And then, last but not least, keep reading. Writers that don't read oftentimes struggle. Not always. I'm sure there are some out there that when they're writing, they can't pick up another book because it'll affect them too much and they won't be able to stay focused on their task. But most writers read and continue to read, whether it's in their genre or out of their genre. All right. That'll wrap that up for today. Appreciate you stopping by, giving this a listen. As always, if you like what you heard, give it a like, make comments, share, subscribe. Feed the algorithm beast, as it were. If you didn't like it, go ahead and leave a dislike. That also helps, surprisingly. So, again, this was part 1 of what will hopefully be a 2-part series. Next time, we're going to talk a little bit about how to revise. And I might even bring up a piece with some of the critiques that I've received. But as for today, that's going to do it. I thank you for listening and hope you have an awesome day.